Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtatarista Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhayachanara Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Parivrajagacharya Ashtatarista Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So up to text 19 of Canto 3, Chapter 18, the battle between Lord Boar and Hiranyaksha. Please repeat. Tayo spridostigmagadaha tangayo. Tayo spridostigmagadaha tangayo. Shatta sravagrana vivriddhamanyavaho. Shatta sravagrana vivriddhamanyavaho. Vichitramargam sharatorjagishyaya. Vichitramargam sharatorjigishaya. Vyabhadilayam ivas shushminor mridaha. Vyabhadilayam iva shushminor mridaha. Tayo spirilostigmagadaha tangayoho. Shatta sravagrana vivriddhamanyavaho. Vichitramargam sharatorjigishaya. Vyabhadilayam iva shushminor mridaha. Okay, stop, Mataji, you can. Tayo spridostig megadaha tangayo. Tayoho, them, spridoho, the two combatants, tigma, pointed, gada, by the maces, ahata, injured, angayoho, their bodies, kshata ashrava, blood coming out from the injuries, grana, smell, vivrida, increased, manyavaho, anger, vichitra, of various kinds, margan, maneuvers, charato, performing, jigishaya, with a desire to win, vyabhat, it looked like, ilayam, for the sake of a cow, or the earth, eva, like, shushminoho, of two bulls, mridaha, an encounter. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: there was keen rivalry between the two combatants. Both had sustained injuries on their bodies from the blows of each other's pointed maces, and each grew more and more enraged at the smell of blood on his person. In their eagerness to win, they performed maneuvers of various kinds, and their contest looked like an encounter between two forceful bulls for the sake of a cow. Purport: here the earth planet is called Ila. This earth was formerly known as Ilavrata Varsha, and when Maharaj Parikshit ruled the earth, it was called Bharatavarsha. Actually, Bharatavarsha is the name for the entire planet, but gradually Bharatavarsha has come to mean India. As India has recently been divided into Pakistan and Hindustan, similarly the earth was formerly called Ilavratavarsa. But gradually, as time passed, it was divided by national boundaries. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhantamsha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priyam Vancha Kalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're seeing a very fierce battle between Krishna and his pure devotee. I was thinking when I was reading this just now that this is a very extraordinary description of the fight and also the severe injuries which both parties are sustaining is incredible. Remember, they're not just ordinary proportions. This is a galactic battle which is happening in outer space. The demigods are watching this battle, which is taking place because, of course, they've asked the Supreme Personality of Godhead to appear. They've approached Lord Brahma, and so they're expecting victory for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, one thing which Srila Prabhupada is focusing on in this purport is the aspect of time. Srila Prabhupada is saying that the earth planet was initially called Ila, but when Maharaj Bharat was here, it became Bharatvarsha, and gradually as time progressed, the Vedic culture, it dwindled in its boundaries, in its reach. I remember a couple of purports in Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada is talking about how, especially at the time of Kartavirya Arjuna and Parshuram. So at that point in time, Parshuram, as we know, he killed 21 generations of Kshatriyas. So as he was doing this, the Kshatriyas who were there in Bharatavarsha, who were not following the Vedic principles properly, they actually fled Bharatavarsha. They fled from Bharatavarsha, and Srila Prabhupada mentions that they went to at least two places. They went to Greece, so they became the Yavanas, and in another place, Srila Prabhupada says that they became the kings of Egypt. So if you look at these two different cultures, they appear to be geographically very far from Bharatavarsha, from India, but at the same time, if you study these ancient cultures, they're very similar as well. For example, they have the aspect of demigods, right? Demigod worship is there. They have a deity which is in charge, or which is administrating all the different aspects of material nature. Wind, the aspect of death, the aspect of afterlife, water, all natural resources. They even have that concept of what do you call it? Sumeru, Mount Sumeru is there as well. So if you look at ancient Greek culture, you have Mount Olympus. If you look at the ancient Norse culture, you have Valhalla. There's a mountain called Valhalla as well. And we know Zeus, who's the chief demigod in ancient Greek. Well, they say mythology nowadays. But of course, we are believers in the Shastras. So all this information is given there. This is our authority. So Zeus, he carries which instrument? He carries a Vajra. He carries a thunderbolt. So he's representative of Indra. So it's degrading. This Vedic culture is degrading. And then Srila Prabhupada says India has recently been divided into Pakistan and Hindustan. And as time is passing, it was divided by national boundaries. So we can see from this the effects of time. Right? So the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 2, it starts by talking about the effects of time. Tatascha anudinam dharmam satyam kshama daya kalena balina rajan nangshiti ayur balam smriti. One's life, dharma, the aspect of dharma, the aspect of truthfulness, strength, physical strength, memory, all these things would degrade day by day as Kali Yuga progresses. So as devotees, what we have to do is we have to fight against this, because Maya is not a stagnant energy. Maya is the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and she's very, very powerful, extremely powerful. Just yesterday, Cyrus Prabhu, he was showing me an excerpt of a lecture given by Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And Tamal Krishna, I don't know if it was a public lecture or if Maharaj was speaking to just a handful of devotees, like in a room conversation. But Maharaj was saying something very interesting, and something which is not emphasized so much. It's a very specific point, but it's not emphasized so much within ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada, as we know, he did say on 2 occasions, when devotees asked him in 1971, that if you want to be empowered in book distribution, Srila Prabhupada, what should we do? We want to be empowered in preaching. We want to become empowered book distributors, emissaries of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. So what should we do? And Srila Prabhupada said in 1971 that if you want to be empowered, to preach Krishna consciousness, specifically to distribute books, Srila Prabhupada said, you have to arrange your schedule in Krishna consciousness in such a way that you can chant your 16 rounds from start to finish without any interruption. That's what Srila Prabhupada said in 1971. And then in 1977, the year which Srila Prabhupada passed away, the exact same question was asked to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada by another group of devotees somewhere else, in another part of the world. Srila Prabhupada, how do we become empowered in book distribution? And all those years later, Srila Prabhupada said exactly the same thing. If you want to become an empowered book distributor, Srila Prabhupada said, you have to chant your 16 rounds from start to finish without any interruption. So this point was clarified by my Guru Maharaj, because sometimes we may think, okay, if we chant some rounds before Mangalarti, and then there's Mangalarti, and then we have the japa period. So is that Mangalarti, is that a break in our japa? So my Guru Maharaj said that technically it's not a break. It's still chanting, it's still kirtan, it's still glorifying the holy name. So it's not considered to be a break. So you can chant your rounds before Mangalarti, attend Mangalarti, and then continue. That's not considered to be a break in your japa. However, in this particular lecture, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he was being very straightforward and strict. I'm not sure, maybe these devotees were sliding off a little bit into Maya, but he was telling them from his own realization that if you want to get rid of namaparad, offenses to the holy name, very quickly, and Maharaj says within a few months, he says you should arrange your schedule in Krishna consciousness, lifestyle engineering, in such a way that you chant all your 16 rounds before Mangalarti. Have you heard that before? That was a very profound point Maharaj is saying. And Maharaj is also saying that don't try to influence me to change what I'm saying. I'm not going to say anything else just to please you, just to satisfy you. He said it again and again, that we have to put our faith in the holy name. It's so powerful. This is the medicine, this is the panacea for the present day and age. But how many of us are actually taking the medicine as it is prescribed? So he said time and time again that we should try to chant our 16 rounds before Mangalarti. And he says that I guarantee, Maharaj says, I guarantee it that whoever every day chants their 16 rounds before Mangalarti and follows the 4 regulated principles, Maharaj was saying that in this lifetime they will go back home, back to Godhead. So it's so important. So the point I'm trying to make is that Maya is a very active energy. It's not a stagnant energy. It's not an inert energy. It's not a potential energy. It's a very active energy, just like the soul. Because Maya is a person. She is Durga Devi. And just like if we have some sort of a devotional service which is given to us by our spiritual master, then every single day, at every single moment, Vyavasayatmika buddhir eke ha kurunandana. 4th chapter of the, 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita says that, and Srila Prabhupada took inspiration from this verse, that those in Krishna consciousness, their intelligence is not many branched, it's focused. Tivrena bhakti yogena. They're very focused in executing the order of the spiritual master. So similarly, Maya Devi is actually a pure devotee of Lord Krishna. So she is very, very focused in her service to Krishna to keep the conditioned souls here in this material world. Icchan rupam apiyasya chacheshtate sa govindam adipurusham tamaham bhajami srishti sthiti pralaya sadhana shakti rekha chaye vayasya bhuvanani bibarti durga. She's just like a shadow of Krishna. Krishna is there, we see in the beginning as well of Bhagavatam, when Vedavyas, right, he got darshan of Maya, she came as a shadow. She's connected with Krishna just like the shadow is connected to our form. But the shadow is not the substance. So I remember one devotee in a lecture, he was explaining about the 2 different effects of Maya. As we know, there's the avaranatmika potency and the prakshakatmika potency, which is the first is the covering potency and then the dragging potency. So he was giving a very practical example of how police in undercover police in New York City, how they used to, and maybe they still do, how they catch pickpockets. So what happened is that he was giving the example that there was a subway station and thousands of people, and everyone's waiting to board the train, and then all of a sudden you see this drunk guy. He looks like a bum. He looks like he doesn't have a place to stay. He's just walking along the platform, and he's got a beer bottle in one hand, and the other hand, I don't know what he has, something. He must be holding something. And then on the back of his pocket, his pant pocket, there's a $20 bill. And it's not fully in his pocket. It's sort of half there, so people can see it still. And as you know, in subway stations, the trains are coming and going, so there's a lot of wind which is created. So he was saying that this $20 bill was fluttering very nicely. Right? So it was catching everyone's attention. Right? Everyone is focused on going to work, but why are people working? Because they're working for money. So here we see a $20 bill and it's fluttering in the air, and everyone actually wants it. Everyone desires it, but no one is game enough to actually go and snatch it from him. So then, one person out of the throngs of people, out of the crowd, he thinks, yes, I will take the risk to get this $20 bill. And slowly, he goes up to this drunkard as he's walking, and he puts his hand out, and everyone's watching, by the way, because everyone wants to be in that position of getting that money. So then he puts his hand on the $20 bill, and he takes it out. And as soon as he takes it out, what happens? The drunkard turns around, slaps a handcuff around his wrist. So that's how, this devotee was saying, that's how Maya works. She presents us with an opportunity which is extremely alluring. And as soon as we go for that, then she captures us in her grasp. So as devotees, we should be working against that very forceful, very powerful energy. My Guru Maharaj says that we should have a very, just like here we see, there's a great virya ras happening between the Supreme Personality of God, Lord Varaha, and Hiranyaksha. They're fighting against each other. So in the same way, we should have a virya ras with Maya as well. So if Maya throws a slap towards us, then what should we do? Should we get scared? Should we get afraid? She's very powerful, indeed. If she does present us with some enticing opportunity, then yes, if we don't take shelter of Krishna, of Radha Gopinath, then we are in a very fearful position. But how do we have that virya ras, that chivalrous attitude with Maya? We have that by taking shelter of Krishna. So if you practice, like what Tamal Krishna Maharaj was saying, if you get up every morning and try to chant a good number of your rounds before Mangalarti, attend the morning program, read every day for at least an hour, memorize some shlokas, then I think we will be in a very advantageous and very stable position to understand how Maya is working and to counteract her maneuvers. Right? Another thing which my Guru Maharaj was saying in a lecture recently is, why does the jiva fall down to the mature world? Okay, it's that age-old question, why did we come here? So the question might be said is that, okay, the jiva is Satchitananda, it has an eternal relationship with Krishna, and it's experiencing Anandamayo Bhyasat. The topmost Ananda that we can have is with our relationship with Krishna. So why did we fall down in the first place? So my Guru Maharaj was explaining that Srila Prabhupada, in answer to this question, gave a very practical, very nice answer. For example, he said that if every single day I'm taking parathas for dinner, right? Every day I'm eating parathas for dinner and I like it. They taste very nice. But sometimes, from time to time, I might get the desire to have carrot halwa instead of parathas or something, rasgulla or something like that. Now, does that mean that I don't like parathas? No. It doesn't mean that. It just means that I have my own individuality, I have my own free will, and I just want to try something different. I want to see if I can get more pleasure, if I can get more happiness, more ananda in something else. But that doesn't mean that I dislike the parathas. So then we try the carrot halwa. So right now we're tasting the carrot halwa actually. And it's actually not so sweet. So that regular schedule that we have to have in Krishna consciousness is our life-saving grace. Rupa Goswami quotes a very beautiful verse in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Kamadinam katina katita palita durinideshas tesham jata maina karuna natrapa nopashanti utsrijaitan atayadupate sampratam labda buddhis tvamayata sharanam abhayam mam niyung shvatmadasye. He says that for countless births I've been a slave to my senses. I've been serving my senses, but they have not given me any remuneration. They have not given me any satisfaction. Temporary, but not deep, not fulfilling. That param drishta that we're all seeking for is not there when we engage our senses with sense objects. Why? Why does Krishna say that? He says, Yehi samsparsha da bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adi antavanta kauntaya. They have a beginning and they have an end, but we are looking for sustained, eternal, long-lasting, and ever-increasing happiness, which is not to be found in material sense objects. Just consider, you are a living person, you are a living entity, but we are looking for happiness in dead material things. Now, foundationally, there's something wrong with that. We're living, but let's say, I have a mobile phone, and I think, why do I buy the mobile phone? Could be two reasons. Because everyone else is buying the mobile phone. So I go for it, being influenced by the herd mentality. Or I actually think, because of the influence of Maya, I actually think that there is some happiness hidden inside that mobile phone. But I'm living, I'm a spiritual spark. That mobile phone is dead. And it costs so much to get as well. Shrama eva hi kevalam. So much useless endeavor to get temporary happiness. And then what happens with time? Srila Prabhupada is talking about the effects of time. Just as Bharatavarsha was divided, Ilavartavarsha was divided, Bharatavarsha was divided, and now Bharatavarsha, which was India, is divided into Pakistan and Hindustan. Similarly, the original iPhone got divided into, right? The next model, and then the next model, and the next model. Why? Because it was not satisfying the people. So more things have to be created for sense gratification. So that is evidential proof. Why do we have to create more and more things for our sense gratification? Because sense gratification doesn't satisfy us. Whereas I was telling someone, I think I was telling Yubraj Prabhu the other day, that how long have you been in Krishna consciousness now? 6 months or something, right? 3 months. 3 months. And for the last 3 months, you've given up your sense gratification, which you're experiencing in your karmic life, and all you have been satisfied in is just chanting 3 words, Hare Krishna and Rama. That fortified with devotee association and the whole culture of Krishna consciousness, that has been sustaining him for the last 3 months. That sustains people for 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. Devotees like Navin Narada Prabhu, Vijay Prabhu, they've been distributing books, battling Maya on the front lines for 30 years, 40 years. Sannyasis in ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada's disciples, they've been practicing Krishna consciousness for the last 50 years. Just by these 3 words. So we should understand that there is something within these words. The holy name is non-different to Krishna, and Krishna is Rasaraj. So that rasa, which we want to experience, is there within the holy name, is there within our relationship with Krishna. So another example, this is a story actually that I came across in terms of how we should engage our senses in Krishna's service. Right? I think I told this some weeks back. Basically, there was a farmer He was a rice farmer. And he was getting old, and he had 3 sons, and he wanted to know which one of his 3 sons would carry on that rice farming business, which he had invested so much of his energy, so much of his time into. So he told his 3 sons, look, each of you, I'm going to give you 5 grains of rice. And after giving you 5 grains of rice, I want you to keep these 5 grains of rice, and after 5 years, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to see what you have done with these 5 grains of rice. And if I'm satisfied with what you've done with these 5 grains of rice, and remember, these 5 grains of rice are really valuable for him. Right? It's very valuable for him. Just as a journey of 1,000 steps, we say, starts with a single step, similarly, a gigantic rice business starts with a single grain of rice as well. So it was very valuable for this farmer. So then, okay, he gave the 5 grains each to his sons, and then he went away. And then during the 5 years, each one of these 3 sons did different things. The first son, he looked at the 5 grains of rice and he said, what's the point in me, taking care of these 5 grains of rice? What is the value in 5 grains of rice? He threw it away. And he thought, after 5 years, when my father comes back and he says, what have you done with the 5 grains of rice? He said, I'll just, go to some shop and I'll just buy a bag of rice and I'll just take 5 grains of rice from there and I'll tell my father, look, here's the 5 grains of rice. So he didn't want to take responsibility. He wanted to negate. He wanted to give away. He wanted to renounce. The second son, a bit more intelligent, but not the best still, he got these 5 grains of rice and he related these 5 grains of rice to his father. Okay, my father has given me these 5 grains of rice. Because I respect my father, I should respect these 5 grains of rice as well. So what did he do? He created a mandir. He created a temple for these 5 grains of rice. And he encased these 5 grains of rice in a nice, covering, glass covering, gold-plated. And then every day, along with worshiping Krishna, he would worship the 5 grains of rice. Do arati for the 5 grains of rice. Now, the third son, what do you think he did? Yeah, obviously, right? So he planted the grains of rice, and within 5 years, he had something going. He had a rice plantation going. So those 5 grains of rice got converted into thousands, millions, billions of grains of rice. So the father came back and he saw. And of course, he gave his whole business to the last son. But what are these 3 different things? What are these 3 different options which these sons did? What do they represent? You see, Krishna has given us senses for us to employ them in His service. Us using our senses in any other way, and there's only one other way, which is sense gratification. It's either serving Krishna or it's either serving us. And even if we say, look, we're serving humanity, we're serving our family, Srila Prabhupada says this is just extended sense gratification. Why do we keep relationships with our friends, or material family? We're not talking about devotees, but material family. Because the philosophy of you scratch my back and I scratch your back. I will have a nice, congenial, materially lucrative relationship with you if you satisfy my senses in return. And in the same way, I expect that you have a relationship with me if I satisfy your senses. If I don't disturb you in your sense gratification. Have you ever come across people that they have a desire, they want something, and then you get in the way of that? You get in the way of that. Sometimes we have to go through that in Krishna consciousness, especially if you're mentoring people, right? When devotees are new, even if devotees are in Krishna consciousness for many years, if we haven't been practicing Krishna consciousness properly, we're still harboring material thoughts, material desires. Now, the guru has to come, or some senior devotee has to come, and they have to be heavy. Srila Prabhupada says, sadhu means one who cuts, and guru means one who is heavy. So both of them have to do a thankless task, just like Maya, just like Krishna, just like Krishna's avatars, just like Varahadev here. So when we get in the way of someone who wants to fulfill their material desires, naturally they become angry. Why? Because Krishna says in the second chapter, Dhyayato vishyan pumsa sangasteshu pujayate sangat sanjayate kama kamat krodho vijayate. If that kam, if that lust is unsatisfied, it will turn into anger. And if it is satisfied, it will turn into more greed. Both things are not good. Lust, anger, and greed, Krishna says, are the three gates to hell. So this is how they are related. It is lust fulfilled, which turns to greed, and it is lust unfulfilled, which turns into anger. So the first son, who threw away the grains of rice, that is someone like an impersonalist. Krishna has given him senses, Krishna has given her senses, but they think, I'm not this body, I am not the mind, I am just the impersonal oneness. Therefore, these senses are Maya. Even when Krishna comes to the material world, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says, he defines Mayavadis in 4 ways. He says, Mayavadis are those who consider that Krishna's body is material. They consider the paraphernalia used in Krishna consciousness to be material. They consider the process of bhakti, from Shraddha to Prema, to be material. And they consider the spiritual world, Golok Vrindavan, to be material as well. So, he defines Mayavadis, anyone who is falling under these 4 categories is considered to be a Mayavadi. They may be in knowledge, they may have philosophy, but it is covered up by Maya. So the first son, he negated the rice. His father gave him the rice, just like Krishna has given us senses for a purpose. But he threw away the grains of rice, just like we throw away our senses and their real purpose. So that is the first son. So the father was not pleased with him. The second son, what did he do? The father gave him rice and he started to worship them. So similarly, Krishna has given us senses, but then we worship the senses. How do we worship the senses? I just quoted that verse by Rupa Goswami. Kamadinam katina katita palita durinideshas. We worship the senses by fulfilling their desires. The tongue wants to eat, it wants to taste something nice, so then we fulfill the desire of the tongue. The ears want to hear something nice, so then we go, we run and we hear that. We want to touch something nice, so then we go and fulfill the desires of that touch sensation. Actually, it's just the mind, but mind is the king of senses. We know in that chariot example that the mind is holding, it's connected to all the senses and it's driven by the intelligence. So what was he doing? He was worshipping the senses. But his father didn't want him to worship the senses. He wanted him to use the grains of rice in some practical way which would please the father. Krishna is not so satisfied when he sees us misusing our senses in sense gratification. If we use our senses in sense gratification, running here and there to fulfill the desires of our mind and our senses, then we are no less than servants of our senses. We are placing our senses on a much higher position. But what does it say in the Bhagavad Gita? It says that higher than the senses is the mind. Higher than the mind is the intelligence. Yo buddhe paratastu sa. And higher than the intelligence is sa, the soul. But we take it the other way around. We take it that the senses is the highest. And we worship the senses. So we should not be like the second son as well. And the last son, he was given the senses, he was given the grains of rice, but he used them in the proper way which would please the father. So that is the process of bhakti. And one last point we can talk about briefly is, why is Krishna performing these extravagant pastimes? I touched on this in some days back when I gave the class. It is because he wants to infuse our mind with samskaras. Now generally when we talk about samskaras, we consider them to be something bad, right? We say purva samskar. Currently in the mature world, we have 2 types of samskars. We have sinful samskars and we have pious samskars. So in Krishna consciousness, we're trying to develop spiritual samskars. And it is the spiritual samskars which will help us at the time of death. When Krishna says in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam, tyajanti ante kalevaram. How do we think of Krishna at the time of death if we have not cultivated throughout this lifetime spiritual samskaras? Srila Prabhupada explained in a lecture, Bhagavatam lecture in Los Angeles, I forget which year it was, but he said that sometimes when we practice Krishna consciousness, after some years we think, hey, we're pretty pure. We're in a good place, We're doing well. Bad thoughts are not coming to me anymore. People are respecting me. I know the philosophy. I'm good at different services. So we're doing quite well. But then Srila Prabhupada gave the example of a pond. Right? And a pond, it looks very still. Looks very calm. Apuryamanam achala pratishtam. Right? In the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying that the sea is looking very calm, but actually the rivers are coming, but the sea is still calm. But Prabhupada was saying the pond is very calm on the surface, and we think that we are, doing well in Krishna consciousness, just like the pond is very unagitated. But then Srila Prabhupada is saying that all of a sudden, a bubble will come from the bottom. From the bottom, where all the dirt is, sedimented, a bubble will come. And it will come right to the top, and Srila Prabhupada says it will go pot. So sometimes we have all experienced that we'll be chanting very nice, we'll be absorbed in our service, but all of a sudden, from nowhere, some memory of our past sinful life or pious life will come and will distract us in Krishna consciousness. This is known as vritti. So vritti means inclination. So the purpose of yoga, Patanjali says, yogino vritti, he says yogino vritti nanta, something, I can't remember. He says the purpose of the yoga system is to annihilate these vrittis, is to annihilate these material inclinations. And the way we can do that is by practicing Krishna consciousness. The way we can do that is by observing ourselves, giving ourselves an opportunity to have those spiritual samskars. Just like we recently came back from our trip overseas. We were in Mayapur for a few days, then we were in ISKCON Pune for like a week, and then we were in Vrindavan for a week. So I went with 2 other brahmacharis. And actually the reason why we went to Pune was to study the architectural marvel, which is the NVCC, the New Vedic Cultural Center, because as you may be knowing, we're rebuilding this temple. This temple is getting old. It's a very old building. It's about 70 or 80 years old, this building that we're in right now. And it's falling apart. So we want to rebuild this building. We want to renovate this building. So we went there. Sriman Prabhu sent us there to understand how it's been constructed and if we can incorporate some of those ideas here when we do the work here in this temple. So that's why we went. But anyway, I was praying all the while that please, Krishna, give me some strong samskars that I can bring back with me to Sydney and I can carry with me in my Krishna consciousness. So that if we are in that situation where we're being bombarded by our material inclinations, material desires, we can just close our eyes and we can just meditate on those samskars and we can just chant Hare Krishna. And that's a very powerful way to get yourself out of that situation. So I remember it was Panihati festival day, and we were in Mayapur, and that was our last day in Mayapur actually. And on that day we had actually gone on a TOVP tour with the tour guide. His name was Ishtadev Prabhu. Ishtadev Prabhu. So he took us, and there was about 20, 25 other people, and we went on a tour of the TOVP. So I sort of struck a relationship with him, and I started to talk with him, and then he asked where we're from, and all that sort of stuff. So, okay, fine. So the tour finished, and then after lunchtime in the Panchatattva hall, temple room, they were actually selling pots, right, of dahichira. Beautiful clay pots, and they were painted very nicely as well, and they're selling them as some fundraising. So I was praying to the Panchatattva, standing at the back. It's very loud kirtan going on as well. Please give me something I can take back with me from Mayapur. And then all of a sudden, the person who's the MC, he calls out, and we have Ishtadev Prabhu, and he's donated such and such amount of money, so please come up to collect your pot of Daichura. So then he came up, and he got his pot, and thousands of devotees there seated down, and he gets the pot, and he comes to the back of the Panchatattva, and somehow his eyes just cross me, and then he sees me, he's like, Sriman Nrsimha, and he came up to me, and he dug into the pot, the full pot, and he got a handful of sweet rice, and he gave it to me. That wasn't it. Then what happened is, I thought that was it, but then they actually had some spare chipped rice left, actually. So after everything was donated away, after the fundraiser was over, so I got that chipped rice, then they brought out a huge trough of chipped rice, and it just went past me. It just went past me, and I just saw it. Now, the scores of devotees who were there, they didn't see it, because they just put it from the side. And they took it immediately, they took it out of the temple room. So then I grabbed the other devotees, and we went out, and they were giving those leaf plates, and they said, take as much as you want. And that was the best chipped rice I've ever tasted. Condensed milk, yogurt, honey, sugar, obviously chipped rice, and the fruits, mango, jackfruit. When you add jackfruit to chipped rice, it's like a whole different thing. Really amazing. No, popo was not there. There was grapes, cherries as well. This is Mahaprasad of the Panchatattva. So we got a plate there. So first of all, I got that handful from Ishtadev Prabhu. Then I got a plate full. We all got a plate full. And then there was a devotee, a pujari, he used to be here, actually. But then he's back in Mayapur, and he's a very significant person there. I think he's in charge of the security department, and he's the pujari of Lord Nityananda as well. So he dresses Lord Nityananda every evening. Yes, evening. So then we finished this big plate of chipped rice, and then I went past the doors of the Panchatattva temple, because the hand wash area is close by. And he's still there on the stage inside, near the Panchatattva, where the altars. And he sees me, and he's got that microphone. So he calls out to me, Nrsimha, come. I'm like, Prabhu, I'm Muchi, I just ate. Doesn't matter, just come right now, quickly. So then I just ran straight into the temple. And he said, this is from Lord Nityananda. He gave Lord Nityananda's own pot of chipped rice. So it started off with one handful, then a plate, and then a whole pot. And we couldn't finish that. And that was Lord Nityananda's personal pot, which was offered to him. And remember, the Daichura festival was started by Lord Nityananda. He instructed Raghunath Das Goswami to feed all the Vaishnavas on the banks of the river, Panihati. So we got his direct mercy. And we took all of that, and then we met one of our senior god brothers there, and he recently was living there. He started living in Mayapur, so we gave the rest of the pot to him. We asked him, Prabhu, you distribute the rice. We have to leave the next day, so we can't take it. So that was a very powerful, strong experience. We had more experiences, like in Vrindavan. This time, we got the fortune of shopping for Radha Gopinath, and got the opportunity to buy some silver flutes and things like that. But I was thinking, yes, that's a very fortunate thing, but I don't want my strongest samskar in Vrindavan to be Loy Bazaar. And the hustle and bustle of Loy Bazaar, the e-rickshaws and the horns and all that sort of stuff. Please give me something else, although it's a very great opportunity you give me to shop for you. So in our last, actually, we went on Govardhan Parikram twice. We were there only for a week, and it's peak summer there right now, 45 degrees. So most devotees are starting their Govardhan Parikram at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. The first time we went with one devotee we know there. We started at 3 a.m. And we finished by 8:30. We came back to Radhakund at 8:30. But then we were thinking, as we were traveling, we were doing the parikram in the morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. He was telling us, So Govardhan is on that side. And we looked to that side, all we could see is just darkness. So for 21 kilometers, we're going, and almost the sun rises at 6:30. Yeah, so Kusum Sarovar is there, Govardhan is there, Sankarshan Kund is there, and we're looking, and it's like we can't see anything. So we thought to ourselves, we have to come back another day. So some days later, we came back, and we had some issues getting a rickshaw and all that because they've stopped the auto rickshaws just outside of Krishna Balaram temple. There's only e-rickshaws, and they don't go all the way to Govardhan anymore. So you have to walk a considerable distance to actually catch an auto rickshaw. So we finally started our parikram at 12 noon. 45, 46 degrees. We had 1 liter bottle each of Bisleri. That's all we had. Minimal. We were thankfully wearing footwear. And we started our parikram. And we got to halfway. So we got to the Nrsimha temple halfway, where the tongue of Giriraj is. And then we took a rickshaw, the rest 50% on the way, because the devotees were very tired. We didn't want anyone to pass out. So, but the samskar that I had was finally, after all that walking in that heat, finally coming to the Nrsimha temple, going to the top of the Nrsimha temple, and just looking at Giriraj. And that, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, I think that is the best view of Giriraj that you can have from the top of Nrsimha temple. You can see the entire Giriraj. And if you just turn the other way, you can see Apsara Kund. And there's one more Kund there as well. No, there's one more Kund, just right next to Apsara Kund. And I just sat there on top, and I just absorbed that through my eyes, and I prayed to Krishna, please let it go into my heart. And thankfully it's still there. So samskaras means if you keep meditating on it, that samskar will get stronger. So if you have that samskar in Krishna consciousness of taking darshan of Radha Gopinath, or something you've done, please meditate on that and it will get stronger. And that will help you throughout your Krishna consciousness, and as Krishna says, at the time of leaving this body as well. Hopefully we pray that samskar will come to us at that time. Okay, so I'll finish here. Any quick question? Yes, Prabhu. Again, I would quote that verse from Brahma Samhita. Ananda chinmaya rasatmataya manasu ya praninam pratifalam smaratam upetya lilayatena bhuvanani jayati ajasram. Now, if Bhagavatam is saying, Lord Varaha came, Hiranyaksha came, and they fought, and Hiranyaksha died, would that leave such a strong impression in your mind? No. Why do we want those details? We watch, now we don't watch Hollywood films, but maybe when we used to watch films, right? Why do they take so much care and attention at which camera angle it's going to be, how the sound effect is going to sound, the quality of the video, 4K, all that? Why is that attention to detail put? It's to make that experience much more stronger and long-lasting. So Bhagavatam is doing the same thing. Vedavyasa is giving us all the details so that we can absorb that scene in our mind. And that's what we're supposed to do. When, for example, there's a verse in the 10th canto of Bhagavatam which is describing Mother Yashoda as she is churning the butter. And details are given about how perspiration is coming from her forehead, how the flowers in her braids are falling from her hair because of her hard labor, and how, as she's churning, the bangles are making sound. So it's giving us all this information so that we can visualize this scene in our mind. And again, that samskar is stronger by having these details. So we are very thankful for Bhagavatam at giving us so much details, because that's where the fun is. The fun is in the details. The relishment is in the details, so that we can have a much more powerful experience when we read Shastra.